A listener production.
Hi, it's Helen Smith here. Welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, nostalgia. It's something we can't get enough of, and it turns out there are a lot of us who are nostalgic for eras before our lifetimes. And one generation who's leading the charge is, you guessed it, Gen Z. But when did we start labelling behaviour as being nostalgic, and are there any mental health benefits to it? But first, let's check the afternoon headlines. It's Friday, the 26th of September. US President Donald Trump will impose a 100% tariff on imports of branded pharmaceuticals from October 1, unless a pharmaceutical company is building a manufacturing plant in the US. Back in May, pharmaceutical drugs imported to the US were already slapped with a 25% tariff, and they're one of the top export markets for Australia to the US, worth around $1.6 billion in 2023 to 2024. Health Minister Mark Butler says the government's still working out how President Trump's drug tariff will impact Aussie exports.
We're still working to understand the implications of this announcement, which is still only a few hours old, and we've been making the case since it first became clear that the US was going to take some action in this area about the benefits of continued free trade in pharmaceuticals between our countries.
The announcement has made Australian medical companies lose billions in values, with global biotech company CSL announcing the tariffs have already wiped $1 billion off their value. A Qantas flight has landed safely in Auckland after a mayday call over concerns of a fire alert in the cargo hold. The Sydney to Auckland flight had 162 passengers on board who were told by pilots of the Boeing 737 that a smoke alarm had been activated in the cargo bay. All of the passengers are safe, and when the plane landed, emergency responders, including around 16 fire trucks, were at the ready, with engineers now checking what triggered the alarm. And as we head into the weekend, the list of the cheapest supermarkets for Aussies has been revealed, finding that Aldi has once again topped the list, beating out Woolies, Coles and IGA. Consumer Group Choice sent mystery shoppers to 104 supermarkets in 27 locations across the country, who were all tasked with grabbing 15 regularly priced items, which included 8 home brand products and 7 base basket items like milk, apples, chicken breast fillets and frozen mixed berries. It was a very close contest though, with only a few dollars between each supermarket. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with Dr Clay Routledge from the Human Flourishing Lab, whose PhD looks into the psychology of nostalgia. He explains why 68% of Gen Z reported feeling nostalgic for eras before their lifetimes, and why being nostalgic was first treated as a medical condition and then a psychological disorder. Clay, what makes historical nostalgia so powerful for Gen Z and younger generations who've never lived through the eras that they're romanticising? How can someone be nostalgic for something they've never lived through?
When I first started doing this research, which was more than 2 decades ago, I really was focused on the type of nostalgia that people have personally lived through, what we call personal nostalgia. And what we discovered in that research was that people often use their own cherished memories that they accumulate over their life when they need some confidence, when they need a boost, when they need comfort, when they need inspiration. We pull from our most meaningful memories to help us out. So as a quick example, if you're feeling lonely, you move to a new city, start a new job, you don't know anyone, it can be difficult, but you can look back into your memories of times with friends and family that made you feel loved and supported. So I think that background's helpful because when we think about historical nostalgia, what we're discovering is for a generation that grew up basically online with smartphones and internet all around them, they're feeling this sense of anxiety and uncertainty about the future. They're looking for inspiration, for guidance and comfort, but they're not easily finding it in their own personal memories because they grew up always with the internet. What we've discovered, which I think is really interesting, is that they're reaching further back in time, but it seems like for the same reasons that we reach back into our own lives. They're looking for inspiration. They're looking for experiences and ideas and wisdom that maybe from previous eras to draw on in their own efforts to improve their relationship with technology, to find more in-person and offline activities, to reconnect with nature, to reconnect with other people in real life, all these sorts of things. And looking to the past seems to be helping them in a creative way, because I think it's important that they don't want to return to the past. They don't want to give up their technology. This isn't regressive. They're not saying, let's just get rid of all technology. What they're saying is maybe there's a balance that we could work towards, and maybe pulling from an era that predates our own, it could be helpful.
Looking at some of the psychology of nostalgia, why are people drawn to it so much? You mentioned they're possibly finding a balance, and maybe there's some mental health benefits to it.
I was actually surprised when we first started doing this research, because my original thinking was, okay, nostalgia is a source of comfort. We know it's a source of entertainment, but life can be difficult and stressful, and sometimes you just need a little escapism. And that was kind of the thinking at the time, is that nostalgia would comfort us by helping us just distract us from our current worries. But what we discovered is it does much more than that. And it's because we have these memories that we can build up. You can build a bank of meaningful memories to pull from at different times in our lives when we need some support, some inspiration. And it has all sorts of mental health benefits. And of course, people can become perhaps over nostalgic, or do too much. You can do too much of a good thing, but it seems like from our research and the research of others, for most people, most of the time, we're using it in a very healthy way that kind of helps us navigate our current anxieties and stressors by pulling from the past. The future hasn't happened; it's unknown. So if we're looking for ideas and inspiration for what decisions to make, what to prioritize in our lives, what we should focus on, we can look to the past for what's worked before.
And what are some of the consumer trends we're seeing that points to the psychology of nostalgia being on the rise?
So there's all sorts of interesting trends, particularly with young people, but you see this in other age groups too. So for instance, you're seeing an increase in the sale of physical media. This could be vinyl records and also CDs. I was at a live music show the other night, and they were all Gen Z bands. And I went out to the merchandise table and to see, what they were selling. And I saw that one band was selling cassette tapes of their music, and that was the only way to buy their music. And so you're seeing these kind of physical media trends, but you're also seeing other things too. Like young people are playing board games more, but what we're finding is they're also more and more looking for those in-person experiences where they can get together with others and play like actual physical board games. Physical book sales are up in the US, and young people are the main drivers of physical book sales. Trivia nights at bars are increasing. So you're just seeing all these kinds of in-person activities and consumer purchases that, again, aren't antagonistic to digital media. I mean, people are doing both. They still have Spotify, but they're also saying, for the music I love the most, maybe I should buy a physical copy of it as well.
We're definitely seeing similar trends in Australia with the rise of book clubs and trivia nights happening all across the country here. But I want to take it back a little bit. When did we first start labeling behavior as being nostalgic? Where did nostalgia come from?
It's really an old idea. I mean, even before the word nostalgia existed, you can see references to it in ancient texts, ancient literature. But it was in 1688 when the term was first coined. And what's interesting about it is it was coined by a Swiss physician to represent what he believed to be a brain disease. And so nostalgia, as originally conceived, was this notion of homesickness causing a lot of suffering. Like people, Swiss soldiers that had come down from the Alps to fight in the plains of Europe were missing home. This was causing all sorts of physical symptoms. And so it was very much thought of as a medical disease, which of course we don't think of it that way anymore. But there's this long history of nostalgia being treated first as a medical condition and then a psychological disorder. And it really wasn't until, the last probably 30 years or so with the rise of advertising and consumer psychology that you started to see a greater appreciation that people actually like to feel nostalgic and that they'll spend money on products and experiences that allow them to connect with their past. And then after that, it was psychologists like myself and others who really wanted to understand, well, why? what is it about our past that's so meaningful to us that we'll spend a lot of money on revisiting it, and we want to share memories with others and reconnect with the things that we did in our youth. And that's where we started to discover that nostalgia is not an illness. It doesn't make people sick. It's actually the reverse. When people feel distressed in some way, they turn to nostalgia as a way to cope with that, as a way to respond to that, and as a way ultimately to overcome their feelings of distress.
So have we seen nostalgia trends in the past, or is this something right now really being driven by the development of technology?
I mean, we've definitely seen nostalgia trends in the past, including historic nostalgic trends. I mean, you can think of, for example, it's long been the case that there have been people fascinated with previous eras in history for different reasons. Maybe some people just like a particular fashion or aesthetic or like architectural aesthetic of a time. But what I think is interesting about right now, what we're seeing right now is, a lot of this is fueled by technology. Thanks to advances in digital technology and social media, people can share, they can create content and share content and access content online much easier than they could in the past. And so I think what's happening right now is there's just so much more opportunity to create, to share nostalgic content, to spread it around the world. In addition to that, I think the irony is it's some of that same digital technology that's actually driving nostalgia, because young people, for instance, have a lot of anxiety about how the future of artificial intelligence, for instance, might affect their job prospects. So young people have a lot of worries about the future, and they're using some of these tools that are implicated in those worries to nostalgically explore the past to help deal with those worries. So it's a very fascinating time how technology is being used to spread, amplify nostalgia, and also is often part of the reason that people are nostalgic to begin with.
So how do people find a healthy way to balance between being nostalgic and not completely getting stuck in the past?
Yeah, that's really important, because people can obviously idealize the past or romanticize the past in ways that are inaccurate or not healthy. But, from our research, what we're finding is, fortunately, it seems like most people are using it in constructive ways. Again, we have these trends where young people are looking for more offline analog opportunities, but they're simultaneously very interested in new ideas and innovations. And so we have surveys that on the one hand show that young people are very historically nostalgic, but also that show young people have a lot of positive and open-minded attitudes about future technological development. So I think a lot of people are navigating this issue in a healthy way. I mean, a lot of times their response to seeing historical nostalgia or any kind of nostalgia be prominent in society is to assume that that's backward looking, that, well, if people are looking to the past in this kind of way, they must be hiding from the future or avoiding their present challenges. But that's not what we find. In fact, it seems like nostalgia is helping people kind of have the fortitude and the confidence to move forward and address these challenges. So I think people are largely using it in healthy ways.
Clay, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you for having me.
That was Dr. Clay Routledge there, the Vice President of Research and Director at the Human Flourishing Lab. So that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. But tomorrow we have the weekend briefing with Antoinette Lattouf, who is joined by media personality and presenter Mitch Churi.
Be a chicken! So I squatted, Antoinette, on my knees and walked around the office in front of the highest paid breakfast radio presenters in the country. And they're dying with laughter. Then that fades, their attention moves to something else, and I'm just sitting there squatted on the floor.
That hilarious and very entertaining chat will be in your feed tomorrow, but until then, we'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Insta at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.